again, bro.
Yeah, good to be here. I'm excited to talk about Revelation today.
I am too. And look, late last year, I had Drew back on the podcast right before, we had the pre-order that he had the pre-order sales on these
The
things.
pre-order sales for the new restored version of the triple.
Ooh, sexy. You got the green copy, huh?
Yeah, I just like the color green.
I went black, right? I just feel like,
Yep.
solid black cover, right? Nothing fancy, but I get it. But no, I mean, I started going through them, right? And like the first place I went, right, was straight back to those revelations. Because
Right.
I'm not sure
You're
there's
like, I
been
know
another.
I've read the LDS edition. I want to find
Right.
out what's different, what's more, right? So that's the first place you want to look and see.
Right. And the other thing is there is something different about holding them inside of a book that
Mhm.
has scripture paper, right? There's something that just sets the tone for that. That's a little bit different than reading them, say, out of a scholarly manuscript or something like that. Um,
Right, or a pamphlet
right.
or a website. Yeah, I can look it up, but having it in my scriptures, it's like just feels so much more complete. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I've got my scriptures right here, and I don't have to look at 100 different resources just to figure out what's missing or where something is. It's all right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so as I was thumbing through those and got excited, I'm like, you know what I need to do? I need to do a series on like these revelations that are lesser known and really parse it out and let people hear the voice of the Lord come through on these things because it really does. And so this is going to be the first of a series, and I don't think this is going to be the kind of series where it's like boom 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 1 week right after another. I think these will be sprinkled throughout. And so but this first one, man, we're going to go over the four hidden revelations, the four big ones, the
Yeah, and
ones.
of course, the funny thing is now that I'm reading them out of the restored version, there's even bigger ones, really. But these four really, I wanted to talk about the four hidden revelations, specifically those four, because that really sets the historical stage for why isn't this
Right.
already in there? Why isn't it in my LDS edition? Well, the history as to why is fascinating, and I think it helps
It
us
is.
understand where the divergence comes from and or why some things are missing. So yeah, starting with those four, each one has a very powerful reason for why the revelation was given, what it means, and why it's hidden. And what does it mean that it's hidden?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? The most obvious answer to that is, what do you mean by hidden revelations? Well, you mean the church hid them from the membership. Well, yes, but they're hidden because they contain hidden knowledge. They contain deeper concepts than a lot of people are ready for. The church couldn't have hidden them if the membership didn't want them hidden, right? If the membership
Right.
hadn't turned from them. And I think that there's a reason that I have some sympathy for why people leave certain revelations hidden in their own life. Someone said, gee, I can't find the TV remote. I couldn't find the TV remote for days and days and days. And then I found out it was under my scriptures, right? Well, shoot, you should have been picking those up. Every revelation is a hidden revelation until you receive it for yourself, till you learn it, right? And so often I think, as I talk about these hidden revelations, I want us to think, what's hidden in my life? Because are these truths that I'm not ready to accept?
Yeah.
Because we're always hiding our own eyes. We're hiding our own eyes from revelations that we're not ready for.
100%.
Mhm.
100%. That is such a good point, right? Because just because they're out there doesn't mean that we necessarily want them, right? I go back to when I first became a Mormon. I remember getting up
Mhm.
off my knees. This was just into the LDS church thinking, I
Mhm.
don't want to be a Mormon, right? Mormons are weird. They believe weird things. I don't want to do this. But nonetheless, I knew what I had known at that point and I didn't have a choice. Now, likewise, with these revelations, if there's something in there that you don't like, chances are that's the one you need to read first
Right? Um,
because it's going to hurt a little bit, but it's going to hurt the way it hurts when you go to the gym, right?
right.
It's
If
a
this is
good
good
pain. It's
sacrifice, a
growth.
good sacrifice is going to make you grow. It's going to
Exactly.
give you something of great value, even if it's hard to accept.
Yes.
It's hard to do.
Yes. And look, I I tell people this a lot when they ask about these sorts of things. I'm like, "Look,
Mhm.
just because you read it and you start to internalize it, doesn't mean that you're expected to have it mastered at that moment, right? This is all a process. So don't be afraid of that. Don't shy away from that discomfort. That
Mhm.
discomfort is usually a sign of growth, and that's a good
Right.
thing."
And it's a very good thing. I mean, I think that that can be abused.
Sure.
I think it's worth mentioning that in the Mormon fundamentalist context, there will be false teachers, false leaders, false prophets who will tell you, oh, this discomfort you're having is a good discomfort of you learning to sacrifice. And then it
Right.
turns out that it's serving their own ends. They're making you sacrifice to a false god. And then they will take advantage of that. But it is true that true sacrifice, even when you're putting your faith in the right place, it's still sacrifice. It's still hard. And I think that a lot of Mormons have lost sight of that.
Yeah.
In that context, a lot of LDS people think that they can turn away from certain things or not have to know them, and then it won't be binding on them. Oh, I'll be saved in my ignorance, people think. No, a man is saved no faster than he gains knowledge, said the prophet Joseph Smith. And so if you're talking about sacrifice to the right God, yeah, it's going to be painful, it's gonna be difficult, but it's gonna be worth it, and it's important to make that sacrifice.
100%. It rings true to something I once heard a man say that I really like the saying, which is, "The truth will absolutely set you free, but it's gonna
Mhm.
make you miserable first."
But it's gonna make you
And
miserable first. Right, there was a little thing someone said, "Lies are so comfortable because 'cause they're squishy. They can be
yes,
anything you want them to be. You can mold them to whatever comfortable worldview you have, and lies will always be comfortable. The truth, however, doesn't bend, it doesn't change. You have to accommodate it,
yes,
and that makes it hard sometimes and pokey and difficult to embrace, but it's worth embracing because it will
right.
change you to match it."
Yes, yes. Truth has no agenda. It exists simply because it's true.
Yep.
And because it has no agenda, it also doesn't care how you feel, right? It doesn't care about perceptions or any of those other things. Now, those are all things that we have to contend with as
Right.
people, and I will say this, that it gets easier, but
Mhm.
you gotta do the hard thing first. You gotta do the first hard thing, which is
Mhm.
pick up the weight and
And
then go forward.
this is the first point I wanna make before we get into hidden revelations is, are they hidden from our sight because we are not ready to receive them, because we don't want to accept? That's the first question. Um, the second question, that I think that we have to ask ourselves when we're looking for hidden revelations, is are we willing to embrace them in such a way that they truly become known to us. And what will that require of us? Section 132, for example, is a hidden revelation, even though it's published in everyone's Doctrine and Covenants, because it says those who will receive this law must abide it. Well,
Right.
how many people really receive it just because it's printed in their Doctrine and Covenants? Now, in order to truly receive a hidden revelation, you have to receive it for yourself, the confirmation of the Spirit. I really think that one of the reasons why it's so hard to accept revelation is because we learn line upon line, precept upon precept, the milk before the meat. And there's this saying along those same lines from Eastern religion that only when the student is ready does the master appear. And I think that a lot of us as LDS people, we have to recognize that if what we really believe is all truth, if our religion encompasses all truth, then that means we're probably not ready for all of it all at once. We have to learn to accept things line upon line, precept upon precept. So if somebody's saying, I love all this meaty doctrine, you have to accept it now, and you don't see how it fits, and you're not ready for it. I think that it is okay to say, I don't say that fits in yet. I'm not ready for it. What's not okay is to assume that we are going to receive all the blessings without all the obedience. You have to instead say, I am still progressing. I might not be ready for that yet. I might not accept this or that yet. I might want to put that on the shelf or set it aside. But are you setting it aside because you're not accepting the fact that you need progress and that you're too comfortable where you are? Or are you willing to accept that there are blessings that you will not receive unless you embrace further light and knowledge?
Uh,
So, this is the second thing that I want us to ask about each of these things, which is the question of truth. This is what it was. The question of truth is this: if the truth does not change, and when we receive any blessing from God is by obedience to the law upon which that blessing is predicated, as it says in Doctrine and Covenants section 130, we have to approach these and all revelations from a place of saying, whether it's hidden to me right now or I can't accept it yet, yes, that's understandable, but you will not receive the blessing until you fulfill a truth. Because again, a truth isn't something that depends upon our opinions. It doesn't depend upon our preferences. It doesn't depend upon our willingness or preparedness to accept it. A truth is independent in that sphere in which it is placed. And as Joseph Smith said, we're saved no faster than we gain knowledge, and that truth is independent in that sphere in which it is placed. What he's saying is there might be many principles we don't know. It doesn't mean they're not operating on us. Okay? Think about this in terms of
right.
medical science. Even if we don't know if we've been exposed to a particular pathogen, uh, our opinion about it doesn't matter. What matters is the facts. Are we going to have the health to fight off this infection? Do we have the right environment for this? Do we have the right environment for that? It doesn't matter if we didn't know. And so
Right.
I think sometimes people think when it comes to spiritual things that these rules are different, and they're not. The rules of truth are always applicable, the same as they were for anybody else. Just because someone was ignorant of the truth, say during the Black Death, and they didn't know what was causing this, that didn't make the Black Death any less real. They were still going to live or die depending on whether or not they got infected. And the
Mhm.
fact that they did not understand what was causing it only made them more vulnerable to losing that blessing of life or succumbing to the curse. It's the same thing for us right now. And so, even though the first thing is why is this hidden? What do we need to do to accept it? Why is it out there? The second thing we need to recognize is the mere fact that these weren't canonized or were canonized and then decanonized or anything like that is that people want to say, do I have to accept it? Do I need to accept these revelations? Do I need to accept this meat I'm not ready for? The answer is both yes and no. The truth will operate regardless of your feelings. The truth of the blessing that comes from obedience, the curse that comes from disobedience, is upon all mankind, whether they know the truth or not, whether they accept it or not, whether they reject it or not. Those truths are going to come, and judgment will be just. But part of the justice of that judgment is the mercy that we have the opportunity to learn line upon line. But don't think that you can reject this or any revelation of God and be forever justified in burying your head in the sand, because the truth is the truth.
That is such a great point. And, I had talked to people last year when the 1886 revelation was acknowledged by the church.
Right?
Um,
And that was such a powerful moment, right?
yeah,
For the
that was a
church to
huge moment.
actually just say, look, it's a revelation to John Taylor. It actually does exist. And the most shocking thing to me, that I'm going to want to get into, because this is one of the four hidden revelations, is that along with it came some very incriminating letters from people like
Yes,
J.
it
Reuben
did.
Clark, where J. Reuben Clark literally has a letter right next to that document from John Taylor that says, we have to lie about this.
Ape six it.
We
Never let it come
have
up
to
again.
lie about this. Please, the instructions are hide this envelope, hide this letter. We're going to lie about this. We have to keep this hidden. It's too
Yeah.
explosive.
Yep. I was in Hans Mill when I got the phone call on that. Now, I won't say from who I got it from, but I was in Hans Mill. I'm like, "Are you kidding?" And they're like, "Nope, tomorrow. Watch." And I'm like,
Watch.
"Okay, here we go." Right? So I woke up the
Uh-huh.
next morning, and sure enough, there it was. But I
Mhm.
remember when it came out, the knee-jerk reaction to those who didn't like the revelation was, "Well, we never voted on it, so it doesn't
Right.
matter." And
And
I
that and
and
so they're
this
saying if we
ties
didn't
into
vote
what.
on it, it's not binding on us, right?
Right.
But what does that mean? Like, look, they get to vote on what they will accept or what they won't accept. They don't get to vote on what is real, what is the truth.
Right.
And
Right.
and understanding that distinction, I think, is that's why this is so important to understand. That there's a big distinction here. Yeah, you personally, you can accept or reject this, but understand the consequences of that. You will not get the blessing if you reject the blessing. You
Yep.
will fall under the curse if you're ignorant of the truth, you're under danger. At the same time, I understand that these things are hard and we have to learn line upon line. And if you're like, look, this doesn't fit in the architecture of my faith, that's one thing. And I get that. But are you progressing to the point where eventually it will? Or are you saying, oh, I'm comfortable here? Like I was talking about comfortable lies and hard truths. You say, I'm comfortable here. The lie that most people will be embracing is, I will get all the blessings anyway, but you won't.
Right. 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 I tended to look at it like, okay, you can vote if you want it in your canon or not, or if you
Mm-hmm.
accept it. But unless you're willing to call John Taylor a liar and said he didn't receive a revelation, he was deceived,
Mm-hmm.
it's still a revelation. And you have to be willing to live with that and what that means and all of its subsequent um oh trials that come along with it. You have to understand that it stands independent of what you want, of what your
Right.
feelings are. This happened. And
Right. And I think that
how
that's the danger is that people will say, well, the church didn't accept it. We didn't vote on it. Therefore, it's not binding on us. And I'm like, well, yes and no. Yes, you don't have to live this. Yes, you don't have to accept this. But if you don't, you can't get the blessing associated with it. The
right.
blessing is it's dependent upon the law upon which it is predicated. You just don't get the blessing. I'm not trying to make you and God doesn't make us accept anything. He doesn't say you have to be blessed. He says, I I the Lord, I command and I revoke, and yet then men receive not the blessing. And that's the formula that I think a lot of people miss. They think it so long as I'm checking the boxes that I accepted I had to check the boxes of, then I'll get all the blessings. I will sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will become a God in heaven. You certainly will receive the blessing for every commandment you keep. Absolutely. And that is a good thing. I'm not saying it's all or nothing. I'm not saying this should be black and white. Heaven isn't black and white. This is why there's different degrees of glory and all kinds of things. But if you want the blessing, you have to obey the law upon which it is predicated, which means you cannot reject any such commandment and expect to receive that blessing.
Yeah. I was gonna say if you actually put that argument in kind of today's terms, if you will, or layman's terms, it's this. What you're basically saying is that God gives a revelation and then we choose not to accept it. And God's like, well, I guess that wasn't true. I guess what
Hmm.
I said wasn't binding after all. It's
Hmm.
kind of a silly prospect.
That's a silly
And
prospect, right? Because it denies something that we know is true about everything else in life. If someone says,
right,
"Oh, I don't believe in germs," that doesn't mean germs don't affect them.
right, 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 right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, the germs will have an effect. Sorry. It
They'll have
really
an
does.
effect whether you believe in them or not, right? Like,
Right.
but I didn't vote for that. Look, I know that you didn't vote for that, and I know that you don't believe in washing your hands, but the effects are going to happen one way or the other, right? Like, you want the
Right.
blessing of avoiding the germs, you got to learn how to avoid the germs, you know?
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Science tells me if I pile a bunch of pizza in my pie hole, I'm gonna get fat.
you're going to get
Now that
fatter. It's
I
just
didn't
a fact.
I did not vote for that, Ben, but damn it, I can attest that's the way it is.
That is the way it
And
is, whether we like it or not, you know? This
right.
is the way I want to read you something Bruce R. McConkie said about this. And it's
Okay.
funny because he was talking to the RLDS at the time. This is in 1976, and he gave a talk called The Common Consent of the Church about this question of what do we accept, what don't we accept. And he was saying to a bunch of RLDS people that their Doctrine and Covenants was deficient because it had removed so many of the revelations accepted by Joseph Smith. Now, the same argument applies to anybody who rejects the revelation. But but for context, that's what Bruce R. McConkie was talking about. He wasn't necessarily talking about the four hidden revelations, but This principle is true. And Elder Bruce R. McConkie was right when he said this. He says, men have their agency, of course, and they can accept or reject any truth of which they have knowledge, but they cannot change the truth or its effects upon men. As individuals or in groups, men may reject the blessings that would have come by obedience, but for their rejection, they are damned. All the revelations of God are binding, whether the church accepts them by vote or not. If they are rejected by vote or otherwise, those so acting only cut themselves off from the promised blessings.
It's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, yeah, I know that this is one of the things that's hard about quoting people like Bruce R. McConkie is that he had 1 foot on the ship and 1 foot on shore, and the ship left the harbor and he fell in to the
Yeah,
drink,
I was gonna
essentially,
say
right? He was trying to have his cake and eat it too, and defend the church and hold on to the mainstream LDS church. Well, at the same time, he had beliefs that were highly incompatible with the direction the church was headed. So,
sure, sure. And look, to
and anyways, I'm going to bear
it was
testimony
a
that
true
Elder Bruce R.
statement he made.
McConkie was speaking prophetically when he said that. At least that is a true principle.
Right. That is a true principle. You are right. All right. Okay, that's enough. We won't do that anymore. No more beating up on poor Bruce R.
All right. Well, if we're not beating up on Bruce, I guess we better dive in and find out what are these 4 hidden revelations? Why were they hidden?
Okay,
So
let's
the
do it.
first of the 4 hidden revelations are 2 revelations that were revealed to Wilford Woodruff and 2 that were given to John Taylor. Now, if
Okay.
you look up the 4 hidden revelations, there's a bunch of places online where you can read them. But the most handy place, of course, is the new restored version,
These
right?
ones? These ones? Shameless plug for Drew.
Shameless
These
plug.
ones.
Buy one of these.
Right.
Okay. And you will find that the first of the 4 hidden revelations is listed as Wilford Woodruff number 4
Okay.
in the restored version. Wilford Woodruff's section number 4. It's also found in various pamphlets, the 4 hidden revelations, the Addendum of the Doctrine and Covenants. This was supposed to be, man, that's really bleached out. You can't hardly see the words. Anyway, the 4 hidden the Addendum of the Doctrine and Covenants, all these things are places where this has been, because these are really important ones. They get quoted all the time. But the first one is Wilford Woodruff number 4 in the restored version, and in that, quite a long revelation. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
Okay. That's all right.
Um, but it was given to Wilford Woodruff before he was president of the church in 1880.
Okay.
And it's interesting because of the context. This is also one of the reasons why it was hidden. He was in hiding. He was running from the marshals who were going to incarcerate him. So, it's about 50 verses long, depending on how you cut it up. And it is a comfort to Wilford Woodruff while he is on the run, while he's in hiding. And so he's asking the Lord, what should we do about all of this? Here we've tried so hard to preach your word and gather the saints, and now we're in this terrible situation. Well, interestingly enough, along with our whole voting thing that we just talked about, is where in the Doctrine and Covenants are we given instructions about voting by the common consent of the church to accept new revelations as part of our canon or not? Turns out it's not in there. It's in this one.
Oh. Oh,
The
interesting.
canonization procedures are actually in this one that has been rejected from the canon.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me sum this up. Let me just see if I got my mind wrapped around this. This is like the epitome of ironic, right? It's like, where do we
Mhm.
get the instruction on where to vote something in as canon or not? From one of the
Right.
revelations that weren't voted on to be put in as canon. So,
Right.
if that is absent, shouldn't you just accept all revelation then?
Well,
If that's not
sure,
in your
right?
canon? I mean,
It's a
I'm
good
not a
argument.
lawyer, Ben, but
Right. Now, again, I don't think the Lord is saying we get to reject revelation in this section either, in this revelation. But yeah, isn't that odd? So technically, if there's no procedure for voting, then but yes, it is in this section toward the end of this Wilford Woodruff section 5, um, it actually talks about um, whenever any one of you receives the word of the Lord, let it be written and presented in your councils. And whatever by united consent you deem wisdom to be presented to the people, let it then be presented by the president, my servant John Taylor, as the word of the Lord. In this way you will uphold him and strengthen his hands, that all the burden will not lie upon one man. In other words, this is how you do it. A revelation gets
Okay.
received. It gets passed up through the councils of the church. The councils of the church, therefore, um, vote on it, accept it, present it to the people. That's how it gets canonized. And wouldn't you know it, yeah, if that procedure is not being canonized, then maybe you have to um it's a good argument. Maybe you have to accept all of them anyway. Let's see here. In the restored version, it has 74 verses.
Yep.
Um and so that would really be the section that's verse 66 through
Yeah.
73 is what I just read, right?
Yep.
So it's in that section. It's in that paragraph. So the other thing though that's tricky, why was this rejected? It was accepted. This revelation was presented to the quorum of the 12 apostles. This revelation was accepted by the quorum of the 12 in the first presidency as the word of the Lord. And it was published originally by the church and thereby presented to the church for their acceptance. So essentially, this first of the four hidden revelations was basically canonized in about 1884. But what then happened? The Edmunds-Tucker Act got much harsher and everyone went back. Everyone was still in hiding, right? And by the time everyone came back from being in hiding, um, really it was the manifesto that ended this period of the Mormon underground. So they're coming out of hiding and saying, okay, we're no longer just on the run. Maybe we can start printing church publications again. Maybe we can start holding all of our conferences and our meetings and having the hierarchy of the church actually function again instead of everyone being running all over the country and hiding. Well, then comes the formal bureaucratic side of things of publishing this in the Doctrine and Covenants. Well, by then they'd already done the manifesto. It's very, very hard um, to canonize something that you have rejected as a people, right?
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons why this basically canonized revelation doesn't get published broadly after that. The other
That's
problem, of course, is he talks a lot about sending down destruction and judgments upon the wicked and judgments upon the church if the church rejects plural marriage in this revelation in
I
18.
see.
Much harder for people in the 1890s to say, oh, yeah, let's canonize that. That will formally require us to acknowledge our own sin as a people in rejecting these principles.
Right.
So
So
I'm going to
so it
turn to
was
verse 30 in the addendum because I'm more
okay.
familiar with my versification than the one that's in the restored version. Verse 30 in the addendum says, judgments will begin upon my house, and from thence will they go forth unto the world, that the wicked cannot escape. In other words, the first judgments are to be poured out upon the church if the church rejects the fullness of the gospel,
Right.
and then only secondarily to the rest of the wicked. Well, that's a hard truth that people don't want to hear. The people of the church
Yeah.
wanted to hear judgments upon our enemies, sure, but they didn't want to hear judgments upon themselves.
Right.
And these are hard truths. Now, essentially, this idea that judgment goes down upon the church first is already in several other places in scriptures as well. But it's still a hard thing to feel comfortable with, right? That the
That's
judgments begin upon the
fascinating.
Lord's house.
Yeah. There's a couple things there. One is it's fascinating that it was essentially canonized, right? Not
Yeah.
essentially. It was canonized. And it doesn't
Mhm.
sound like there was a decanonization process. Instead, they just stopped publishing it, right? We just don't
Right. Well,
publish
and
it
actually, that's
anymore.
the same thing with the doctrine portion of the Doctrine and Covenants that we're
Right.
excited to have in the restored version here. Is that, oh, look, the lectures on faith, they're back in here. How were they decanonized? They were never decanonized. We just stopped printing them. That's all.
Right. Right. And so there's no sort of decommission or anything on this. So this
Right.
one is actually like, even if you use the standard of being voted on and canonized, it's still a force. You just don't have any record of it at the moment.
Right. Well,
You
and
know.
and let me read you verse 35 from the addendum version as well. He says, "My people shall not be hindered in the building of my temples and of my holy name, if they will hearken to my voice and do as I command them." Right? The Lord was promising Wilford Woodruff at the time, and what a great comfort it must have been to him, and yet it didn't turn out that way. The Lord was saying that He would fight our battles. Right? He even commands the 12 to go into their secret chambers and wash their feet. This is the ordinance of dusting of feet
Mhm.
against the leaders of the nation of the United States of America in open defiance of them. And that if they would do that, and then, but there's a lot of ifs in this kind of prophecy, right? If the people would stand firm in their testimony, if the apostles would wash their feet against the nation, if everybody would essentially stand up for what was right, then the Lord Himself would fight their battles. And that is a glorious and important thing. And yet they didn't do it. I'm
Right.
sorry, the church didn't do it. And so when I say that when you reject a blessing, when you reject a revelation, you reject the blessing associated with it. I'm sorry, this also fits. I don't bring this condemnation to Wilford Woodruff. I know a lot of Mormon fundamentalists would. I think Wilford Woodruff did as he was commanded, and that he washed his skirts of the blood and sins of his generation. I think he did what was right, but the church ever demanded more,
Right.
ever demanded more concessions to the Gentiles. Um, and so, he says he's giving them this opportunity that if they will obey, they will receive the blessing. But they didn't obey, and they didn't receive the blessing, and therefore it's hard to want to canonize it because it's a reminder of our disobedience as a people. Maybe not individually. Again, I think many individual people are still have and still do receive their exaltation. But the church as a people um, would be hindered. The church as a people didn't fulfill this commandment, and thereby they brought upon themselves the curse of further judgments and further wickedness. Now, there's another thing in here I definitely need to read, um, because it's going to lead us into the next two sections, which are the two sections from John Taylor.
Okay.
The Lord told Wilford Woodruff, "I've taken many of the apostles unto myself, for I take whom I will take, and preserve in life whom I will preserve, according to the counsel of my own will." Okay. Um, and then he says in the verse before, verse 41 in the addendum version, he says, "I, the Lord, have raised up unto you my servant John Taylor to preside over you and be the lawgiver unto my church. He has mingled his blood with that of the martyred prophets. Nevertheless, while I have taken my servants Joseph and Hammer to myself, I preserved my servant John Taylor for a wise purpose in me." So he's giving a prophecy about some more prophecies, which is that John Taylor wasn't just some bench warmer. He was preserved. He was a twice martyred prophet. He was martyred in Carthage, but delivered by God for a wise purpose in him. Both Joseph and Hiram received 4 balls before they fell, before they died.
Right.
And then Joseph was shot again in a savage manner after he was dead. So I received five shots, but they both took 4 shots. I think there's a pattern in this, right? So Hiram was shot 4 times, Joseph was shot 4 times, and John Taylor was shot 4 times.
Really.
And Willard Richards escaped without even a hole in his robe, and was the only one wearing the garment of the holy priesthood.
Well, and look,
And when they say not a hole in
that
his robe, he did get like his ear grazed or something. Gee, that's
right.
something very Trumpian in that. But anyway, he got he got a little cut. He got a little cut. Um, but he escaped without a hole in his robe. But it's interesting. They each received four balls, and the Lord even says, "I take whom I will take, and I preserve whom I will preserve, and I preserve John Taylor from his martyrdom for a wise purpose." And what was that wise purpose? Well, we're going to find out about prophet, seer, and revelator John Taylor and the work he did. Because I'm sorry, but the LDS Church has buried this wise purpose. They've pretended that John Taylor was just a bench warmer. and they've rejected all of his sections of the Doctrine and Covenants, all of his revelations. So the next one, the next of the four hidden revelations is John Taylor number 5 in the Restored Version.
Okay.
This is interesting because John Taylor, section 5, looks a little bit more custodial, I guess. It's about
Right.
qualifications for different offices in the priesthood and things like that. But it also turns out this is why it was rejected. This is why he gets in trouble. So it says, "Thus saith the Lord to the 12 and the priests and the people of my church, let my servants George Teasdale and Heber J. Grant be appointed to fill the vacancies in the 12, that you may be fully organized and prepared for your labors developing upon you, for you have a great work to perform. And then proceed to fill up the presenting form of 70s and assist and organize in the body of my priesthood, who are your co-laborers in the ministry. You may appoint Seymour B. Young to fill up the vacancy of the presenting form of the 70s, if he will conform to my law." And then here's the important verse. "For it does not meet that men who will not abide my law shall preside over my priesthood." Well, what law was it
I'm
that
sure it was
these
just being
three
sealed.
people had to fulfill in order for them to preside? Celestial
I'm
marriage.
I'm sure it was just being sealed to one woman, right? That's all it was?
Nope, they were already all sealed to one woman, and they had
Oh,
to accept the revelation from God to accept their plural wives and enter celestial plural marriage. Otherwise, they couldn't preside. And why is that? Why is that? And I think it's interesting because I think what he's saying, verse 5 there is it's very much an eternal principle. Those who will not abide my law cannot preside over my priesthood. The Lord isn't just saying, I'm making up an arbitrary rule here. Again, he's revealing to us one of these hard truths to which we must learn to conform. That uh, is just an eternal principle. How could he have a president of the 70 who presided over righteous 70s who were fulfilling a law that he was not? He couldn't
right.
preside over them because he didn't have all the same blessings, the same insight, the same power. Again, when the Lord talks about marriage, he's not doing what we mortals are always doing. We're always talking about, I mean, especially the world is always talking about sexual relationships, um, raising of children, all of those types of things. But the Lord says in Doctrine and Covenants, section 131, this order of my priesthood. If you will not receive this order of my priesthood, you cannot receive the power, right? And so I'm like, okay, he's talking, yes, sealing and priesthood, they're deeply intertwined. And this is something that the world doesn't want to hear. They don't want to hear that this is intertwined. Heck, the world, for a long time had celibate priests, assuming
Right.
that being single was better than being married. But the Lord's saying, no, 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 you don't understand. My priesthood flows through a covenant relationship. The purpose of the endowment, the purpose of the sealings, the purpose of celestial plural marriage is to be in a covenant relationship with me. And that's how my priesthood, or the Lord is saying, that is how the priesthood flows from heaven, is
Right.
in that covenant relationship. Why did it matter that the people of Israel entered the covenant at Sinai? God could have blessed any individual with individual salvation, right? No.
Right.
He made a covenant with the people. They would be sealed together with him in this eternal and everlasting covenant. Because it's the relationship that is the priesthood. This is one of my little pet peeves. People always think the priesthood is something you own. I own this book. I have this coaster. I have this thing. And they think that they can grasp the priesthood as though it were just an object, not understanding that the priesthood is the relationship. And that's why I like saying it's the hood part of priesthood. Sure, you might individually try to act as a priest. What makes you not a false priest, though? Well, my relationship to God in acting in his name
Uh,
is only a true priesthood if I'm doing God's will, not my will. Or if I'm a priest of Molech or some other false god or something like that, a priest of Baal, what makes them a priest of Baal? Their relationship to that false god, their relationship to that false teaching. So priesthood isn't something you get to own. It's
right.
about whether or not you are in that relationship.
So Can I ask a question about
Sure.
that thought right there? There is an interesting quote by Joseph Smith, I believe in the words of Joseph Smith, where he's talking about Abraham, and when Abraham was blessed by, Melchizedek, and he walks away, and Joseph quotes him as saying, quoting Abraham, says, "Now I have a priesthood of my own."
Oh, sure, yeah.
How would that fit in with that same kind of
That's that
idea that
mindset.
you just
Yeah, no,
put
to
forth?
me, that's exactly relevant. See, because the
Okay,
problem is that, Abraham, of course, um yes, the language we're using sounds like ownership of a single noun. But
right,
what was Abraham's problem? Abraham sought after the blessings of the fathers. Why? Because
right.
his own father was a wicked man. And
Yep.
Terah had given up his priesthood that he'd connected him to God, his covenant relationship with God, and he had his covenant with the idols. And so famously, Terah was a high priest and idol maker for these false gods. Abraham was like, "Oh no, here I am. I wanted the blessing." When he learned that his father's faith was in vain, he wanted that faith that Melchizedek had, that brought him into the presence of God, that made him have that relationship. He wanted that for himself, and so I think it's interesting. He says, "I wanted the blessings of the fathers, which is the priesthood." What does that mean? He wanted the same relationship, and he felt like his own bloodline was broken. He didn't have a connection to God
I see.
because, again, this covenant of the sealing ordinances, it was broken.
Right.
He had no priesthood of his own. But when he obtained the blessing from God, now he had a relationship.
Okay.
Now he had a
Okay.
priesthood of his own. In other words, he was like, now it's connected again, right?
Okay.
Now I can pass this birthright on as it went to Isaac and then to Jacob, right? Because he's now anchored to the source of
Gotcha.
authority and power. So that's what I think he's saying. And that's
No,
why I
that
think he
makes
puts
sense.
it in terms of the fathers and the patriarchal order, is that he also, I believe, was Mormon in this way, and and saw that relationship. So I want to read Doctrine and Covenants section 131, starting in verse 1 through 4, because this is kind of that point. It says, "In the celestial glory there are three heavens or degrees, and in order to obtain the highest, a man must enter into this order of the priesthood. And if he doesn't, he cannot obtain it. He may enter into the other, but that is the end of his kingdom. He cannot have an increase." What an interesting thing. Well, what is this? What is this order of the priesthood? The new and everlasting covenant of marriage is what it is. And I think it's interesting. He even tells us what's the blessing or the loss that you experience if you don't enter it. An increase. Well, what does an increase mean? Well, frankly, I think it means additional wives. If
Right.
you do not accept plural marriage, you don't have to live it. But then you can't have an increase. Part of the blessing of plural marriage is that you can have an infinite increase. It's not just about whether or not you have two wives, it's about the fact that you've opened the door to having an infinite number of wives. Eternity is a long time. You can always have more wives, more children, more worlds without end.
Right. Right. So look, we've talked here a little bit about having to obey that law, and I want to get your opinion on something here. If you are a husband and wife who want these things, but the right woman just never comes along, right? And you never have that opportunity.
Mhm.
You think that there's I don't want to say exceptions made for that, but maybe arrangements made for that, right?
Yeah, and I absolutely do think so. Again, the question is are you the kind of being who says, "Thus far I have gone, I will go no further"? Or
Right.
are you in the spiritual mindset that says, "Ooh, it may be bitter as gall. It may be a very difficult sacrifice, but not my will, but thine be done."
Right.
Then that's the main thing I think that matters. And so, yeah, I know that there's a lot of people who feel a little bit like a numbers game, like, "Ah, why is it that I've never found the right women to live plural marriage with? Why haven't I made it over that?" I mean, I'm monogamous essentially, as far as the world's concerned, right? But my
Right.
wife and I identify ourselves as polygamists because we are open. We want
Right.
to find more wives who want to live the fullness of this law. And so I think that's the main thing. In fact, I even I tell the story sometimes. We had We had a good guy. I think I'll just say his first name. His name was Sam. He was a good man, but he wasn't. He didn't have all the gifts that one would expect, right? And I think it was. I think it was some kind of mental retardation. I think that's a bad word now. What do they call it? Developmental delay. Anyways, he had these developmental delays, um, and he was never really husband material, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah.
But he had these great moments of insight and clarity too. I knew he was a good man, I knew he loved God. And at first, it was easy for people to dismiss him because he was
Handicap.
visibly mentally disabled, okay?
Yeah.
But I remember, like, a month before his death, like, he looked at me with this piercing look in his eyes, and he was like, "This is why we must obey the commandments," and he gave me this testimony, and I was like, "Whoa!" Not what I was expecting from a person who normally doesn't speak in complete sentences, and he gave me this beautiful, somewhat brief, but, like, a full paragraph of, like, well thought out philosophical truth, and about how he was committed, no matter what it took, to fulfill all of the Lord's commandments, because the blessings are worth it, right? Well, he died about a month later, and he never married. But in our church, we have a temple, and we sealed him posthumously to
Yeah.
3 women who also never married in life. And they were, different relatives from some of our families when we did our family group sheets, and some of these people never married. And there was, hundreds and hundreds of people that it could have been, and it was prayed about. And the prophet said, "I feel that these women would want to marry him." And he gave a revelation that said not only could he be sealed to these 3 women, but that he would obtain the fullness of all things and all priesthoods and all power, because he magnified all that he was given. So again, I think it's tricky because sometimes we want to say, this is the Protestant work ethic probably speaking to us through Mormonism. It's a false doctrine in a lot of ways, that we prosper according to our genius. We want to take credit for our own successes, or say, "Oh, well, those people didn't have success, and their judgments are just. They probably didn't deserve better." That's not the way the Lord works. The Lord, I think, gives us so much mercy, so much time. The
Mhm.
real question is what if you don't enter this order of the priesthood? Well, I think what that is if you reject it when it's offered to you, that's when you're damned,
Yeah.
right? It's what the Lord says right after in section 132. Those who receive this law must obey the same, or they will be damned.
Yep. Yep.
Well, again, not everyone's ready to receive plural marriage. Not everyone's ready to receive 132. So to some extent, even though it's published in the LDS scriptures, it is hidden to most
Yep.
people. But if it's revealed to you, in other words, if there's the opportunity arises in your life, and this is what the Lord has called you to do, and you reject the author of your being, you reject that blessing, you have the free will to reject that blessing. But understand, when you reject that blessing, you you can obtain it in no other way. You're not going to be blessed for rejecting it. And so John Taylor 5 in the restored version, or the second of the 2 hidden revelations, was rejected because this is a hard truth.
Right.
That that if they don't live it, they can't just set aside this thing because it's hard and expect to receive the same blessing. They won't have the same priesthood power, because priesthood flows into our lives through the covenant, and the covenant isn't just about the marriages, and it isn't just about being sealed to your kids so the families can be together forever, and it isn't just about whether or not someone ordained you. The priesthood is about your covenant relationship with God, the patriarchal order, as Abraham sought the blessings of the fathers. It is all of it. This is why I believe in priesthood sealings of adoption, the patriarchal blessings, which
Mhm.
seal you into a tribe of Israel, the second endowments, which seal you up unto eternal life, the and even the marriages, even the plural marriages. All of these things are relational about how we are becoming like God, and God is acting through us. Not everybody's ready for plural marriage. Not everyone's ready for marriage. Like my friend Sam, he wasn't really ready for marriage. But part of the little revelation when they said we could seal him to these women and that he would obtain all things was a promise that the things that had held him back in this life were the crosses that he chose to
Yep.
bear so that he could learn to overcome all things, right? And that having now overcome, his mind will be freed from those limitations, and he will therefore be able to pass line upon line into all truth. And I think that's available to all of us unless we choose to stop. And that's why it
100%. I
says
couldn't
you'll be damned, right? If you reject this law.
absolutely.
Again, the Lord's not saying this in the Protestant way. He's not saying, I will push you down into eternal hellfire. That's not what it says. It just says, he that receiveth the fullness thereof must and shall abide the law, or he shall be damned. What he's saying is you're either going to move forward or you're going to stop. And it's up to you. Do you want to move forward or do you want to stop? And and I think, but again, some of us will then think, well, then I should run faster than I have strength. I should rush into everything. Also not true. Jesus made it clear it's not meet. In other words, it's not wise for you to run faster than you have strength. But
Right.
receive here a little and there a little, line upon line, precept upon precept. I do not encourage your viewers to rush into plural marriages just because plural marriage is a true principle. It could be a terrible idea for everyone involved.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And the reason I ask that question is I get guys will sometimes read this or families will read this and
Mhm.
go, "Uh-oh, we're deficient." Right?
Uh-oh, we're
And
deficient.
the
We better rush and do this
we
right
better
now.
rush. We better go, right? And you don't
Mhm.
know how many emails I've got where I've had to be like, "Bro, breathe. We're okay." Right?
Mhm.
Like it is way more important right now for you to get right with this principle here in your heart and up here in
Mhm.
your mind. And so if the opportunity comes along, if the Lord so chooses to bless you with that,
Mhm.
you can take advantage of that. Uh, just like your
Right.
story with your friend Sam, there's another gentleman out here who has a family member, and he shared with me the family journal that this came out of. Very similar. This was a guy who even knew Joseph Musser a little bit,
Mhm.
and he was like broken up about this because he was in a wheelchair, like,
Mhm.
and basically the Lord tells him it's okay, right? It's not
Mhm.
a lack of heart you are suffering from. And because of that, all these things will be made right. I know your heart, I know your desires, and I know that if this was an option for you, you would do it. Paraphrasing, of course.
Right. I mean,
And
and that's sort of like the problem with like Alvin, right?
right.
Joseph Smith was surprised to see in vision that Alvin was going to receive all things. And the Lord said,
Yes.
oh, yeah, all those who would receive will receive.
Yep.
And what a comfort that could be, because he's like, how could Alvin, who wasn't ever even baptized by authority, how could he reign forever before God's throne as a God to receive all blessings? Yes, Alvin received plural wives, even though in this life he didn't have the chance. Alvin will also receive eternal posterity. Alvin will also receive all these things, even though he was cut down in his youth and never had the
Yep.
chance. Why? Because Alvin was righteous. And as the one of the righteous dead, he is going to accept all things, and the Lord is going to make it all right.
Yep. 100%. Good stuff.
So yeah, people rush into these things, but yes, to go back to the second of the four hidden revelations. Oh, and you mentioned, I don't even know if I mentioned this properly. The original pamphlet, of course, was published by Truth Magazine.
Yep.
Joseph Musser, who I accept as a true prophet of God,
Yep.
is the one who coined the term the four hidden revelations and tried to bring these out. Why? Because these are such important principles, right?
Absolutely.
And so what was he doing with that first one? He was showing us, look, there was a blessing and the church rejected that blessing, but that doesn't mean that everyone is lost. Just as Wilford Woodruff didn't lose his exaltation when the church accepted the manifesto. Um, there are certain principles, and if we obey them, then God will fight our battles. He included this second revelation, this one from John Taylor, which is found in the as John Taylor 5 in the restored version. He included that because he wanted us to understand you can't preside over the priesthood without being obedient to the fullness of the law. This is basically this is the principle that shows why Joseph Musser could preside over the keys of the priesthood while men like Harold B. Lee or some of these other men could not, right?
Right.
Because Joseph Musser was asked by God to preside over over these keys because he was obedient to these laws.
Yeah, he was willing to keep them all.
Yeah. Um, the next one, and this is probably the most important. We've even already mentioned it. The third of the four hidden revelations, also called Addendum 7 in the Addendum to Doctrine and Covenants, is the 1886 revelation. That's the one that the church finally accepted. And it is found as John Taylor, section 11, my short version. I already said. So important. And now the header there was able to, we're able to put in just before printing Church History Catalog MS 34928, because you can look up the original handwritten revelation
Quick,
in the Church
quick.
History Catalog by the church, even though they had rejected it.
Every time you say that with a number for the church catalog, I'm like, wait, say it slower.
Say
Say
it's
it with the say it slower in a sultry tone. Sorry, I just had to
Sultry
spike the
Tone
football.
Church History Catalog MS 34928. Right? It just sounds so good. It just feels good, right? I remember someone was asking me, like, why does it matter to people so much whether or not the church admits that it exists or not? And I was like, at first it sort of does seem like a nothing burger because I know it's real and there's thousands
Right.
of copies of it all over the place. We all know it's from John Taylor, but it also just feels like a relief because we've been gaslit for 100 years.
Yes.
That's what it was. It was straight up gaslighting. It was that's not real.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating to be like, look, there's so much documentary evidence. Are you kidding me? Are you really going to look me in the eye with a straight face and deny the evidence that's right in front of you? And I'm sorry, but the church leaders for 100 years were like, absolutely. We are going to
Right.
deny all the evidence of history that is right in front of our face, and we're going to pretend that it does not exist and that you are a liar. And we're like, we're not lying. It's just what it is.
Yep. Yep.
And so, yes,
I'll
it's a
tell you
relief for
why
the church to finally admit, yes, okay, yes, we've always had a copy.
I'll tell you why else this is a big deal. This is one email I got, and I know of at least 4 other stories that are fairly similar to this, but this is the one that sticks out to me, Ben. When this came out, I spiked the football for a week. If it was football, I'd be hit with a 15-yard penalty for excessive celebration. There's no doubt.
So celebration.
Let me
You're
tell
so
you why, though.
why?
Because of the email I get from a couple of people.
Mhm.
There's one lady that emails me, and she's in the mainstream church. She is devout there, but she tells the story of her grandfather. And she said, "My grandfather was the kindest, gentlest, most loving man I'd ever met. He would take me fishing with him. He would take me for rides in his truck. At the time, I was his only granddaughter."
Mhm.
Well, what ends up happening is they stumble across fundamentalism. This man
Mhm.
and his wife, and um, this woman's husband finds out about it. So I think it's her maternal grandfather, and so her dad finds out about it and says, "You are not talking to Grandpa so and so anymore," because he believes that you can have more than one wife, and he bases this off of a belief in a false revelation that does not exist. So they cut off all contact, and it's
Based on that
only
lie.
based on that lie, and it's only, you know, 4 or 5 years before this man passes away, well before the church came out that, "Yeah, we have it," right? It's legit. When this woman is in her early 30s, where she gets to reconnect with her grandfather, and the heartbreak in that letter, and I don't sell this cheaply, I don't say this cheaply, the blood of that relationship is on the church's hands,
Yeah.
because let's just say they're legit, right? I'm not saying everything turns out better, but there is a chance that at least maybe that dad goes, "Well, it was legit. We don't do it now, but it was legit. We gotta give grandpa so and so a break."
At least a little grace that he's
A
not a
little
liar.
grace. He's not a
He
liar.
disagrees with us. That's different.
Right. Right. And so that sort of crap right there, when someone says, "Why is this a big deal?" It's because of that. Because they lied for so long. And that lying did damage to families. And that has
Mm.
to be as a man who believes in justice, and I know God loves justice as much as he loves mercy, there will be a reckoning at whoever decided to bury that. Whether that was Heber
Well, we
J.
know who
Grant,
decided to
J.
bury it
Ruber
because
Crown, right.
when they
Heber J.
revealed it,
Grant,
there was a letter. It was J. Reuben
J.
Clark's
Reuben
decision to
Clark,
bury it.
and everybody in between
Yeah,
to
and
the
everybody
time
went
it was
along.
authorized that knew it was real and refused to acknowledge it. Shame on you.
Yeah, about tens of thousands of
Yes.
people who would otherwise have been part of society, part of the church, part of something, who were I mean, look, there's been well over 100,000 Mormon fundamentalists. There's been well over 100,000 people living in plural families since the time of the 1886 revelation. There's been lots. How different would it have been if there wasn't this denial of the legitimacy of them as people, the denial of the legitimacy of their history? The and I'm sorry, but that's where that stems from. If you can gaslight me and say this or that thing in history never even happened, you're all liars, then it becomes much easier to say, and you know what? You're not welcome in our culture. You're not welcome in our society. You're not welcome in our town. This town isn't big enough for your family and mine. Get out. And then
Right.
of course, our church isn't big enough for you and me to both be in the same church, and all those things until you have people out in Short Creek, all excommunicated, trying to figure out what they're going to do. And, Mormon fundamentalism has had plenty of its own schisms, right?
Yep. Yep.
And my
Absolutely.
line comes through the people who weren't in Short Creek, but look at how much pain and suffering that's caused.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but like, would wicked men like Warren Jeffs have really been able to rise to power in the way they did if they weren't so isolated, if they weren't so
Yep.
persecuted, if they weren't so vulnerable to the abuses of people who were going to do their own will instead of God's will?
Yeah. The other thing that this release, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spend so much time
So,
here
anyways, a lot
talking
of blood.
about the periphery of this, but the other thing that this shows is that you can delay the truth. You can run from it. You can hide from it. But at some point, the truth always has its day.
Yeah.
Always.
No matter what you try
Always.
to bury, no matter what you try to deny, the truth is the truth, and the truth will out. It will come
Yes.
out.
The truth is John Wick. It has will and it is coming, and it's
And it doesn't
coming
give
most
up, and
likely.
it's got plot armor, and it's coming for you.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. The truth only on this show are you gonna get the truth is like John Wick. Anyway, the 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 thing is that it is the truth will always have its day. You don't have a choice. And look, I'm not saying that a split wouldn't have happened with the LDS Church, right? I think a
Of
split
course, it
would
would have.
still have
It
happened.
still needed. It kind of needed to happen.
Yes,
This is
right.
the way I read some of Wilford Woodruff's statements about, like, look, we had to act for the temporal salvation of the church, temporal, not spiritual salvation of the church. Again, they're losing a blessing, but we had to make it so that the bottom half of the ladder was still climbable.
Right.
We can't have all the bottom rungs taken out of the ladder that leads to exaltation. So we had to act for the temporal salvation of the church.
Right. Yep. Yep. But had they just come clean about it at the very beginning, maybe you can salvage some relationships.
Right.
Maybe you can foster some understanding from one end of the spectrum to the other.
And this is one of the reasons why I'm so down on J. Reuben Clark.
Mhm.
And it was so fascinating to me to find out more about that reorganization of the church. When they created the corporation and all of that organization stuff that happened, the thing that's really shocking to me is, and here's something about the 1886 revelation: the people who were in the priesthood in 1886, the people who were in priesthood leadership at least in 1886, and the people who were in priesthood leadership in the first presidency, Quorum of the 12, 70s, all the general authorities in 1931, when J. Reuben Clark comes in and joins the first presidency and does all this and makes the third manifesto. When all that happens, how much overlap do you think there was? Make a Venn diagram out of this in your brain. How many people were in both organizations that were both in priesthood leadership with John Taylor and in priesthood leadership with J. Reuben Clark. Do you know how many there are?
Trying to think off the top of my head. One,
Only one.
David O.
Heber
McKay?
J. Grant is
No?
the
Okay.
only member of John Taylor's church who was also a member of J. Reuben Clark's church. The only one. Now, of
Ooh.
course, you're going to find there were pioneer individuals, not in positions of power, of course, that were there. But when it comes to priesthood leadership, it was a complete wipe. And this helps me understand a little bit about how tenuous I mean, people talk about how tenuous Mormon fundamentalist claims are, and some of our claims are somewhat tenuous. I'm sorry, I'll admit that. But look at how absolutely tenuous the LDS Church's claim is to being the same church Joseph was founded.
Yep.
One link. It comes down to one single point of failure, which is Heber J. Grant. And what does Heber J. Grant do? He elevates a guy right out of the Aaronic priesthood who's totally inactive into the first presidency and tells him, persecute everyone who doesn't bow the knee to me.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's important to note J. Reuben Clark is so active, he never even baptizes his own kids.
Right. He didn't even baptize his own children. Another thing to realize, just be like, well, he's a member of the first presidency. Wasn't he prophet or revelator? Wasn't he an apostle? No. He wasn't even, he was ordained to the apostleship like way after. He wasn't ordained to the when he wrote the third manifesto and they denied the existence of the 1886 revelation. He wasn't even a Melchizedek priesthood holder.
Yep.
He was a member of the first presidency for these political aims, for these legal goals. He wasn't even an apostle or anything. And so, once you realize this, I've realized just how tenuous their connection is to claim that they're the ones in charge. They have no legal claim. That was wiped out by the Edmunds-Tucker Act. They had no, and so what they do, they created the corporation of the first presidency so that they could take possession of Temple Square because they didn't
Yep.
own it. Okay, and then they made the third manifesto. Why? Because you got a really good handful of priesthood leadership in the Mormon fundamentalist movement that was there with John Taylor. Not just one
Yep.
guy, a whole quorum of people who remember and live the fullness of the gospel still. So to some extent, I think it's interesting. People will say, oh, well, Lauren Woolley was a little weird, or John Taylor or John Woolley didn't write much down, or Joseph Musser was a little crazy or something. And they'll try to downplay the priesthood
Mhm.
leadership of Mormon fundamentalism, not realizing, I think, that the mainstream connection to the church was actually far more tenuous, but much more powerful and bolstered up by these legal arguments. By criminalizing polygamy, by excommunicating everybody, including just women who were in plural marriages, by taking possession of Temple Square and taking possession of all of these properties through this new corporation that they created, all those things, they were able to take over, but it was a hostile takeover. It was
Mhm.
not it wasn't a vote of the priesthood. It was a actual hostile takeover that a guy from DC, J. Reuben Clark, came in and said, politically, we've got to clean this up. Legally, we've got to clean this up. So let's play hardball and let's pretend that none of this ever existed, deny all of it, excommunicate everybody, and then there won't be anybody left to oppose us. And the law will let us get away with it because the law doesn't want to hand any of this property back to those polygamists. It's
Yep.
still too hot of an issue. The only way to make peace is for us to look like the good guys. We're the ones who are in with the world. We're the ones who are on good terms with the law and the government and Washington, D.C. and all these people. So give us the keys to the temple, the temporal
Yes.
keys. Give us the ownership of the church. Give us the leadership. And don't worry, we'll sort this out. We will get it right the way the law wants, the way the government wants it. We will clean this up. And that's what they do. They issue the third manifesto in 1831, and then they clean house. They excommunicate everybody that they haven't already. And then you've got
Absolutely.
an actual body of priesthood holders in the Council of Friends. You have an actual body of priesthood holders who was actually here through the whole thing versus one guy. Heber J. Grant is the only one that we know was called of God, who was there back in the 1880s, who's still there.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but I don't want to hang my whole testimony of the priesthood in a church on one guy who committed a hostile takeover. It's not good enough for me. He also didn't
Doesn't
perpetuate any of the things that he was called to
No.
perpetuate.
No, no. He was the man that they felt was like, he doesn't even once he's an adult, until he's called to the apostleship, he doesn't even spend much time in Salt Lake. He's predominantly in DC, right?
Yeah.
That's where he's
Well,
at.
he wasn't
He's
called to the
kind
apostleship, like I like to clarify.
right, right,
He was called to the first
but
presidency and was not ordained to anything. He was simply
right,
installed.
right, right. And but he spends most of his time in DC. He's kind of embarrassed, quite
Yeah.
frankly, of his Mormon
Of
roots.
his Mormon history, family history,
Right.
really, not personal beliefs even.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Let's go ahead and read this one because it's not very long.
This one's not
If
very
you're
long, and it is worth reading the whole thing. The 1886 Revelation. Um, and it's filled with beautiful, beautiful eternal principles.
okay.
My son John, you have asked me concerning the new and everlasting covenant, how far it is binding upon my people. Thus saith the Lord, all commandments that I give must be obeyed by those calling themselves by my name, unless they are revoked by me or by my authority. And how can I revoke an everlasting covenant? For I, the Lord, am everlasting, and my everlasting covenants cannot be abrogated nor done away with, but they stand forever. Have I not given my word in great plainness on this subject? Yet have not great numbers of my people been negligent in the observance of my law and the keeping of my commandments. And yet I have borne with them these many years, and this because of their weakness, because of the perilous times. And furthermore, it is more pleasing to me that men should use their free agency in regard to these matters. Nevertheless, I, the Lord, do not change, and my word and my law and my covenants do not. And as I have heretofore said by my servant Joseph, all those who would enter into my glory must and shall obey my law. And have I not commanded men that if they were Abraham's seed and would enter into my glory, they must do the works of Abraham? I have not revoked this law, nor will I, for it is everlasting, and those who will enter into my glory must obey the conditions thereof. Even so, amen.
Okay. First thing I want to dive into. One of the things we hear is that in verse 1 where he says, "You have asked me concerning the new and everlasting covenant and how far it is binding upon my people." I'm not making any not breaking any news when I say we live in a postmodern society,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And postmodernism, it has a funny way of changing words, right?
Sure.
And and we see this even creep into to Mormonism, right?
Sure.
If you ask a Latter-day Saint now, "What is the new and everlasting covenant?" They will say, "Oh, well, that's all the stuff that was brought forward through the restoration."
It's the fullness of the covenant of all the covenants of anything God has commanded us to do. All of it.
Right. However, at this time in history, that means something different, right? That term
Mhm.
at this time in history means one thing and one thing alone, and that is celestial plural marriage. And
I think
so,
the thing that's tricky too to understand is even if we had that postmodern idea that, oh, it's everything that God's revealed, well, didn't God reveal celestial plural marriage?
yes.
It's still part of it, even by the postmodernist approach. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, no, it is. And so, but that's one of the places I've seen where they try to have some wiggle room, right? Is
Right?
look, to be honest, they're just flat dishonest with the history. Because if you spend
Yeah.
any time reading these documents at all, it becomes very apparent.
Right.
And I'm sorry, the government was not hunting John Taylor because he was sealed to one wife or because they were practicing consecration or they
Or
were
because, well, maybe a little bit for the consecration, but
maybe
they
a
were
little bit.
definitely but they definitely didn't never said that they were hunting them down for believing in baptism. They never said that they were
Right,
hunting them down for believing in the laying on of hands, right? They didn't say that they were hunting them down because they had the Bible.
right.
That was not the claim. They were hunting them down because of plural marriage. That was the stated reason. So why else would he be asking? So this is the context in verse 1. You have asked me concerning the new and everlasting covenant, how far it is binding upon my people. Was John Taylor saying, do we really have to get baptized? I mean, really? Do we really need all these scriptures? That's not what he was asking.
No,
He
no.
was asking
It
about the reason why he's in hiding, why he's running for his
right,
life.
right, exactly. And I think that is so important to get across here because I have seen people where they have tried to use this as a mechanism of being like, "No, that's not what they were after him about. They just didn't like temples." And I'm like, "No, that's not what they're doing here,
Well,
right?"
except celestial form of marriage is one of the reasons for temples. I mean,
Right, exactly, there's that, right? But nonetheless, I felt like that was important to broach there, that there's only one thing he's talking about here, and that's it.
Yeah, that's really what he's talking about. And yet, of course, I do love that it these are general principles though. They are broadly
Yeah,
applicable. What is it that the Lord can revoke and the Lord cannot revoke? What is it that the Lord changes and doesn't change? To me, this is one of the reasons why I love this revelation so much. It's because it gives me faith that I can
right,
trust God and his word. For his word and his law and his covenants do not change, and the Lord himself does not change. He's trustworthy. He's dependable. He's not going to just, carpet pull us the last minute because he changed his mind about something.
right, right. Here's the other thing, Ben, if the Lord is not consistent on that,
Mhm,
right? If the Lord says, "Nope, good enough for your ancestors, they needed it, but you don't," well, what does that turn God into? That turns him into a respecter of persons,
mhm.
right? No longer does everyone have to be saved and exalted on the same principles. Now you've turned the Lord into something he has said many times himself he is not, which is a respecter of persons.
Right? Because God's gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, I'll give you the same blessing if you get to live comfortably, and so I'm not gonna require the same sacrifices. It'll be easier for you." Well, what does that sound? That's a lie. That's
Yeah,
the lie that's the comforting lie that we tell ourselves. I don't have to work harder, I don't have to make the sacrifice, I don't have to do a bigger thing. I don't have to do it. It's so much easier for me than it was for them because God will give me the blessing without the sacrifice.
absolutely.
And it's
Yeah,
it's not how that works.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it also again, like you're an attorney, I think you'll like this. One of the things I really like about the legal system in America, or at least how it was supposed to operate, was stare decisis, right? That you're going to look back at case law and make
Mhm.
determinations as an attorney based off of that. Well, what does that do? That provides for stability and predictability, right?
Yeah.
And and predictability and stability is huge. If we know that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and He has asked me to do these things, well, can I look back and see where God asked somebody to perform something similar? What was the outcome? Okay, then knowing that God is no respecter of persons, he is consistent. He is the same today, yesterday, and forever. That means that at some level he will be pleased with that action. Now, is it always going to turn out rosy like you imagine somebody else? No. Sometimes life just stinks, but
Yep.
nonetheless, we know what he expects. And if we know what he expects, then we can do our part to receive as many of the blessings as we can.
Well, we have to make that sacrifice, and whether like the people on like the righteous family of Amulek who were thrown into the fire in Ammonihah, and they were
Right?
burned up.
Yeah.
But the Lord said, "I receive them unto myself. They will receive
Yes.
blessing." Um, or if we get to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who when they were thrown into the fiery furnace, they were spared. Either way, the sacrifice is the same, and the blessing is the same. Those who were willing to walk into the fiery furnace receive a great blessing, and those
Right.
who are not willing cannot receive that blessing. And the blessing
Absolutely.
is that of eternal life. And so you have to give it all. So so anyways, this one's the one that's most understandable as to why it is hidden. So when we ask ourselves, why was this hidden? Well, because this directly challenges the authority of the LDS Church to exist. It directly challenges their claim to authority. It directly challenges the legitimacy of the organization that they created under J. Reuben Clark. It directly challenges all of that. And J. Reuben Clark was smart enough to see that. And that's why he wrote that memo that you can see in the church history catalog now, where he explicitly states, we need to lie about this or everyone will see that we don't have the authority, essentially. Now, that's me
Right.
paraphrasing, but he was like, this will cause so much trouble. Why would it cause so much trouble? Because it would reveal that their church is not the same church and that they
Right.
do not have the same priesthood and that they are in rebellion against God. So they couldn't have that be openly
Right.
discussed. Um, and so what do we need to accept? I think we need to accept that God isn't changing, that the truth, as hard as it is, we have to learn to accept it. because the truth
Right.
doesn't change. Um,
Right.
Now let's do the last one.
Okay,
Um,
before we go there, Ben, can I
Mhm.
point out one other verse in this 1886 one I find
Yeah.
interesting? And that's verse 8 in the canon in the RSV.
Uh-huh.
And it says, "And furthermore, it is more pleasing to me that men should use their free agency in regard to these matters." I think God wants us to want the things that he wants, right?
Right. It's not enough to have like this reluctant obedience of like, I
Right.
guess I'll do it if I have to, but I don't wanna. Right? It's like I don't know if anybody has kids, right? It's like dragging them along. Like, don't
Right.
make me go have fun. And you're like, oh come on,
Right.
can you want what I want? Can't we all be happy?
Right. Right. And look, I want to say this. Sometimes that's the best we can do. Right? Look, you and I have hung out for a space of time here, so I know you pretty well. And I know that you're like me. From time to time you think, I don't want to do this on Sunday, right? I just want to lay here and lay in bed and
Mm-hmm.
think. And sometimes it is like, no, I guess I'll go do it. And that's fine for a space of time, right?
Well,
But
right, because we are all, you can't run faster than you have strength, right? Sometimes you just
right,
don't have strength, and you're like, no, I'm not, I can't do it today.
right, right. And sometimes this thing of fine, I'll do it is good enough. But you
Mhm.
shouldn't stay in that space, right? At some point, you want that will that you have to match the will our Father has so that we can look at things the same way,
Right.
right? What was the thing about David that the Lord loved the most? He was a man after my own heart, the Lord says, right?
Right. He saw things the way God saw them. He believed the way God
Yes.
believed.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so we all have those times. I don't want you to think that it's an all or nothing proposition. We all
Right.
have those times where we're like, fine, I'll go to church, right? Even as adults, fine, I'll get up, I'll get the kids dressed, we'll go to church, so be it. But you shouldn't stay in that space. At some point, you should work ahead. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that one out there, Ben. I didn't mean to
Yep.
derail your thought
Yeah.
there.
No, actually, here's another little fun point about that verse 8. That is the only place where the word free agency appears.
Yeah.
And people talk about free agency in Mormon context, or at least they used to, all the time. Is an interesting point. Where did they learn the term? It was from this. They may have denied that this revelation existed for 100 years, but the vernacular was still being used in everyday mainstream Mormon context all the time, and that's where they got it from.
Yeah. 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 It's funny how those things seem to make a mark, huh?
They
Um,
do, right? Like for example, we talk about exaltation all the time, but a lot of people want to decanonize Section 132. Because they don't
right.
want plural marriage. And I'm like, do you realize that in all of Scripture, the only place that talks about the exaltation of the individual to a state like God, or to be to fully receive all that God has, or any of that, you know that there's only one place in all of Scripture that talks about personal exaltation. It's Section 132.
Yep. Yep. And here's the interesting thing, right? And this is what I see a lot that happens in various religious movements, just not Mormonism.
Mhm.
People will make a change and then have to contend with the unintended consequences. Right? And you
Mhm.
get rid of 132, you're not just getting rid of plural marriage. You're getting rid of ceilings for time and eternity. You are
Mhm.
getting rid of those promises, right? That death and hell cannot touch those if they're
Mhm.
made under the proper authority in
Mhm.
at the proper time in the proper place. You are getting rid of exaltation. Like just go down the list.
Right. And the thing is, it's a domino effect. It
Yep.
cascades all the way down to the bottom. And this is why it says, what about the new and everlasting covenant? Right? Because it's all connected. You let the one domino fall of rejecting that plural marriage is a true principle, at least. I mean, I understand not everybody's living it, but like if you reject God's power to take Mary as his wife, for example, then you reject Jesus coming at all.
Yeah. Yep.
This is something a Catholic priest said, something along the lines of, "If you reject Mary," said this Catholic guy, "then you reject the fountain from whence your redemption sprang, for which because she was the mother of God, and if Mary's not important, if Mary didn't receive the blessing, if Mary wasn't accepted by the Father, there's no Son."
Right.
right? Like, and it's the same thing with all of this. You reject plural marriage, then you lose exaltation and everything, all the way down to the entire New and Everlasting Covenant. Because, like I was saying about priesthood, it's about the relationship. All of a
Yep.
sudden, now you have this idea that we can take this honor unto ourselves and presume to have a priesthood that isn't based upon our relationship to God, but is based instead upon our ecclesiastical bona fides or something. How much does that
Right.
sound like what we condemn in the great apostasy? That somebody can say, oh, because of my great knowledge of the Bible, I now have authority.
Right.
Mormonism rejects that. It's about the covenant relationship, right? Um, if it was all about that kind of authority, then God would never have chosen a boy like Joseph Smith.
Right.
And so Mormonism, all of it, and the priesthood and everything we claim depends upon not letting all these dominoes start falling. Um,
Absolutely.
and yeah, plural marriage is the promise of infinite increase, a
Right.
family that never stops growing. There's always more wives, there's always more children, there's always more growth. And if you'll say, well, gee, that makes the men sound like they're left out or too aggrandized, depending on how you look at it, the misandrist way or the um, the feminist way of looking at the man's role. Don't forget, men also, in my view of this, they still have to do the same thing. Jesus still had to be submissive to his father. And
Yep.
so there's also the patriarchal order, there, which is the patriarchal sealings and the tribes of Israel and the orders of the priesthood and the quorums and the quorum presidencies and all of those other hierarchies. Men also, men on men relationships, men with women relationships, men and women with children relationships, and all of those things increase infinitely. Not one of them ever gets to stop unless you want it to stop. And if you want it to stop, you give up the blessing thereunto appertaining, which is an eternal increase. Therefore, as it says in section 132, therefore you are damned, for you cannot have an increase. So I hope to have an abundance of brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, wives, children, every single one of these in every geometric direction you can imagine, counting your numbers, is an infinity of infinities.
Yep.
All of them grow forever, or if you cut them off, then you don't have that increase.
Absolutely. 100%. Good stuff.
Okay, last one of the four hidden revelations is in the Addendum of the Doctrine and Covenants 8, or in the old pamphlet, The Four Hidden Revelations, number 4, but it is found as Wilford Woodruff, Revelation 5, in the restored version, triple. So Wilford Woodruff 5, now you're going to figure out really fast why this one was hidden, why this one was rejected. Okay.
Okay.
It says, once again, they're being asked to sign another manifesto, just like what prompted the 1886 revolution. Okay. And so in November of 1889, while meeting with lawyers, making these concessions, he receives this revelation. Thus saith the Lord to my servant Wilford, I, the Lord, have heard thy prayers and thy request, and will answer thee by the voice of my spirit. Thus saith the Lord unto my servants, the presence of my church, who hold the keys of the kingdom of God on this earth. I, the Lord, hold the destiny of the courts in your midst, and the destiny of this nation and all nations in mine own hands. And all that I have revealed and promised and decreed concerning the generation in which you live shall come to pass, and no power shall stay my hand. So the first thing he's telling him is, okay, you have to understand, I'm still in control. Yes,
Right.
things are bad. The fiery furnace is over there, waiting for you to burn you up and destroy the temples and all these bad things. But please have faith. I'm the Lord. I'm not powerless here. I hold the
Right.
destiny of all nations in my hand, right? So that should be comforting. But then here's where we get into trouble. Let not my servants who are called to the presence of my church deny my word or my law, which concerns the salvation of the children of men. In other words, sorry, still can't deny my law, the unchangeable law.
Right.
Let them pray for the Holy Spirit, which will be given to them to guide them in their acts, and place not yourselves in jeopardy to your enemies by promise. In other words, sorry, but you cannot issue a manifesto, any manifesto that would actually abandon my law.
Right.
And so Wilford Woodruff doesn't for himself. But the people I mean, maybe we should turn to the actual manifesto, but the actual manifesto doesn't say we're compromising the law of God. It doesn't say that we're actually going to be obedient to it. It just says that we're going to advise the church to avoid breaking the law of the law of the government, right? That's what it says. That we'll give them this advice.
Yes.
And I think there was this idea that maybe this wouldn't be an actual covenant with death and hell. This would just be us trying to beat the devil at his own game. Let's just try to turn down the temperature here. How many people are in prison? We need some excuse to get some kind of amnesty, some way to live. And by this time, all these people had grown so large and had done so much work, they really weren't in a great position to be thrust into another frontier of new country or conquer some new foreign land. I don't know how well it would have gone over if they'd tried to conquer northern Mexico or if they'd gone to New Zealand or right. Like it's really hard to know what else they could have done. And so, but here's the danger, and this is why, like I said, it's pretty obvious why this one's not included. He says, "Place not yourselves in jeopardy of your enemies by promise." You cannot make any promises, and unfortunately, the manifesto kind of grows bigger beyond its britches of what it originally was in 1890. Like 6 months after this, and eventually turns into a full-on covenant with death and hell, in my opinion, and a full-on promise to our enemies that we will abandon our faith.
Right. Right. No, look, I did those episodes with Michael Ness on post manifesto polygamy, and I want to say this. You're right. I'm like you. I don't hold a lot of contempt for John Taylor, and I've often
Or
said,
Wilford Woodruff?
Wilford Woodruff. Would I say John Taylor?
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant Wilford Woodruff. I was gonna say though, there's like one day I'll write a book about the 5 stages of becoming a fundamentalist,
Right?
and
It's
one
like
of those
5 stages of
stages
grief.
is yeah, one of those stages is you will develop a white hot seething hate for Wilford Woodruff, and then you'll start getting more nuanced with your history and start looking at it, and that'll go away. And then you'll discover Heber J. Grant and Reuben J. Clark, and that'll start all over again for a
I'll
hot
start all
minute.
over again. You get pretty mad.
Right, right. But nonetheless, I'm pretty sympathetic towards Wilford, right? Because you can tell that he's got no inclination to really stop the practice, right?
Well,
What's he
besides the
doing?
fact he actually takes a plural wife after the
Right,
manifesto himself.
right. And so he's got no plans on doing this. But, and this is the but
Yeah.
in some ways he should have known better than to do this, right? I get it. I get it. But at the same time, this is what happens. And let's be honest, right? You start capitulating a little bit, it's easier to do it the second time. Um,
Mhm.
I had a football coach who once said a great thing, which was winning is absolutely a habit, but so is losing. And momentum can work against you just as well as it can work with you. And sometimes you find yourself there because you made one bad decision. And that would be my gentle critique of Wilford here is that I know this isn't what you intended, but this is the unintended consequence of what of even signing that a little bit.
Right. Of even subscribing to it, even just for expediency or acting for the temporal salvation of the church, as he put it. There's still these terrible consequences. And I think he definitely fell. I mean, from his own comments, I think he fell prey to something that I really fear in Mormon fundamentalism right now, which is we have this idea, and it's a very dangerous idea. I think it's a very apostate idea that the Lord is going to come and just sort it all out. And a lot of people feel like, well, yeah, I know it's not ideal, but the Lord will come soon and sort it all out. And we forget that might mean him wiping us out for our wickedness and disobedience. Okay, it's a great and terrible day of the Lord. It's supposed to be terrible in judgment upon the wicked. And we seem to think that we'll be counted among the righteous. Well, what makes you so sure? Why are we so self-righteous as to assume we're among the righteous? Um, and I think that one of the things that Wilford fell into was this idea that, like, look, we just have to stall them. They've sent how many judges, how many guns, how many people have died, how many people have been incarcerated, how many terrible, terrible things have happened. There was a rape in Parowan. There was, I mean, this wasn't easy going. This was existential. Okay, this was existential. The saints were facing absolute being wiped out by the world. But the problem is they were fearing Goliath more than they feared God. If they were
Right.
men after the Lord's own heart like David, they would say, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine to defy the God of Israel?" You know what I mean? If all the saints had had the courage of David, we would have been like, "Who are these unelected judges to presume to sit in judgment upon God?" And
Right.
we would have had, and then the Lord could have fought our battles. Then we would have had these assurances, and the Lord is trying to encourage him and all the people. Don't give in to this. You can fight back. You can you can fight back. And yet they felt like they couldn't. They felt like this compromise would work. And I know that some people with their stages of grief in coming to Mormon fundamentalism that are angry at Wilford Woodruff, I've even had some people say, I bet if he hadn't allowed that dang manifesto to go out, I bet that the Lord himself would have come and fixed this, right?
Maybe. Or
Maybe.
or maybe it just sucks for a while and then it blows over, right? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how the
Yeah.
Lord planned on fixing it. I don't
But
think we'll know
it's
here.
such an apostate idea, I think, for us to wait for God to fix it for us when He's already commanded us to do it. And
I
if
couldn't
we're
agree
being
with you more.
slothful servants, this is exactly why I think, like it says in the first of the four hidden revelations we talked about, which is the Wilford Woodruff um, number 4, is it? Um, in the restored version, is that he says, yeah, Wilford Woodruff 4, is that the Lord warns them, the judgments begin upon my house.
Yeah.
He's going to clean his own house first before he cleans
Yep.
anything else. And the problem is that we are prone to say, "Oh, well, God will sort it out later." And I'm like, "Well, what about your kids? What about
Right.
your grandkids? If you don't have the ordinances, if you don't go to the temple, if you don't have the fullness of the gospel." I mean, this is my critique and why I couldn't join with Centennial Park or the FLDS or a lot of Mormon fundamentalist groups. Was I was saying to them like, "But most of you don't even have your endowments. Most of you don't have all these things. What makes you think that you're more righteous just because you have plural
Right.
marriage?" There's a lot to it. It's complicated, and the most common answer I got from them and from everyone else, and from a lot of mainstreamers when I'm like, "No, we have to go live these things," is they'll say, "No, no, no. I know that plural marriage is a true principle, but the Lord will come soon and He'll sort it all out." I'm like,
Right.
"Don't forget the way He might sort it out is to burn you with the wicked, because you were sitting in the midst of His house with these commandments before you, and you're the one who says, 'I want these hidden revelations to remain hidden to my sight.' I can't accept this. I won't believe." Truth is the truth.
Yep.
And sooner or later, God's going to have a people who fulfill his law. We're going to have Zion, we have to be living consecration. And consecration is yet another one of these ways in which we build relationship.
Yep.
A consecrated community is a plural marriage community.
Yep.
It's all one thing, it's all one package, the celestial law. And so I want to be the type of people that God says, "Oh, look, you already live Zion, just like we live Zion. Now we can all come together in the second coming." That's what I think the
Yeah.
second coming looks like. And the people who aren't down for that, they're the ones who have to get removed so they will stop harassing those who are trying to live the gospel.
Yeah. You know, you said something that was interesting, which is we'll just wait for the Lord to come back and sort it out. Well, he kind of already sorted it out, right?
Yeah,
We have a whole bunch of instructions on how he
yeah.
sorted it out, right? That it's called the restoration.
Mhm.
And it's all there, right?
Right.
I'll just
Yep.
tell you what I've seen at times. And this runs the gamut of Mormonism from the LDS church to fundamentalism. And it's that so often we are so scared to offend God because, well, gosh, we don't want to do it wrong. I mean, we'd hate to do it wrong,
So
right?
we don't
And
try at all?
yeah, yeah, so you just don't try at all, right? And I'm like, there's not a more apt description of the servant and the talents that messed it up, right? Well, here's your one talent back, right? I didn't do anything with it, but I preserved it.
But I didn't lose it.
But I didn't lose it. It's right here. Well, that's not enough, right?
Right.
Go try something. Even like, okay, in in my work life, I've had guys because look, it's big money. I get it, right? 300,000 cubic yards of concrete. You kind of want to make
That's
sure that's in the
expensive.
right place.
It's
Right.
gotta be
You have to
right.
put that, right? However, at some point someone's got to make a decision on where it goes, right?
Mhm.
And so I've had guys come back to me at times where they're like, "Oh, Dave, I didn't get that done today." Well, what happened? Well, I just didn't want to make a mistake. And I've told them all this. I review all of your data every night to look for mistakes. I would rather you make a mistake than you do nothing at all. Because if you're doing something, that gives me a point to start from to say, it's okay. You know what? This isn't quite right,
Okay,
but we
here's where
can
we messed up. Here's where we can do better.
right. We can make a plan to fix it. And I can see how you're working and thinking through a problem. And I think the Lord is that way with his people, right? Just do something, right? If you do something and it's not quite right, look, I'm a guy who also has a testimony that I think most of the time when the Lord, quote, smites us, he really doesn't smite us. He just gets out of the way so we get the repercussions of our own bad decisions, right?
Mhm.
He doesn't shield us from those.
Yep.
I think so often when we're trying to do the right thing, when this is in the right place, your heart,
Mm.
and you're trying to do the right thing, if you mess up, I find our Father to be very gracious and like not quite right, but here's how you can fix it and do better the
Mhm.
next time. We don't have to fear him. We must respect him. We must
Mhm.
we must have a healthy respect for him, but
But
don't
he
think of
wants to work
God
with
as the
us, right? I mean, he wants
yeah,
us to
don't
grow.
think of him as the boogeyman who's just waiting to drop the hammer at the first time you screw up. It's been my experience in my life that when my heart's right and I screw up, it's a gentler rebuke and it's usually like,
And you
"Okay,
learn
kiddo.
from it.
Yeah, okay, kiddo, let's try this again." Right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and so to your point there that we'll just wait for the Lord to sort it out. No, he's given us enough that we can sort this
Right.
out.
In
And
fact,
we'll make mistakes.
what it starts to look like is, I know the Lord's told me what to do, but I don't wanna do it. And so I'm
Yes.
not going to do it until he comes and makes me, is what it
Yes.
starts looking like. And that starts looking well, that sounds like open defiance. And
Right.
that's but and I think that that's the danger, is that that's kind of the way I do see it with the mainstream LDS church. They'll say things like, "I know that these revelations were given, but we don't have to live those laws today. We can't live those laws today. And so it'll be made better in heaven. It'll be made better in the next world. It'll be made better when Jesus comes." And I'm like, do you realize what you're basically saying is you're daring God to kill you. You're like, I won't do it unless you kill me and make me do it. I'll do it in the next world. I'll do it when you come back. Sorry.
Yeah.
These are the principles of eternal life. Either you love him or you hate him. And if you hate him that much, the Lord's not going to make you do them, but you're not going to get the blessing.
Yep. Yep. No, it's true. But yeah, I think when we can stop operating out of a fear and scarcity mentality,
Yeah.
we'll absolutely thrive. But we got to put the fear away first and
Got to
just
put the fear away and recognize that even truths that you're not ready for, um, that's okay. So long as you're always making yourself ready to move line upon line, precept upon precept, closer and closer. Eventually, you're going to be like, I really need something, and it'll work out. This reminds me of something I want to say. It was Richards. Oh shoot, I'll have to look it up. But anyways, there's a place where he says about the Adam God doctrine. He says, you might say this doesn't make any sense to me. This doesn't fit into the building of my faith. He said, well, then lay aside that stone for now. But if you build your faith, the time will come when you will find there is no other piece that will fit or will do. And then if you've laid it aside gently, instead of chastising yourself for not being further advanced, or instead of rejecting it and throwing it away, just having it handy, saying, I don't get this, but it's handy. Then there will come a time in your progress where nothing else will do and it will come into its place. It's the same thing with things like plural marriage. Not everyone's ready for marriage, let alone plural marriage. Not everyone's ready to consecrate. I get that. Not everyone's ready to have these hidden revelations revealed in their own heart, in their own mind. But knowing that they're there, if you're humbling yourself before the Lord and you're progressing, I think there will come a time when you will look at that and say, that's exactly what I need. This
100%.
answers the needs of my soul, and then it will all come together. Now, if
100%.
of course, if you're rejecting it, you're just rejecting the author of your being. You're rejecting the principles of life. Yeah, you're going to find yourself having a very tough road to follow because then all your sacrifices will be in vain. They won't bring blessings because we're all going to sacrifice one way or another. Whether or not we wear out our lives and give our lives for God, whether we wear out and give our lives for our own vanity, we're all going to wear out and give our lives.
Yeah.
It comes to all of us. The question is there sacrifice in vain or not? Is it placed in true principles that are always true no matter what?
Right.
Or
Right.
to our false gods of our own vanity or our ambition or some other thing?
Yep. 100%. You used a very eloquent, parable of building a house. I've always said it's like the toothpick in the Swiss Army knife, right? You're
You think this is useless until you need it.
Until you need it, and it may not be for a toothpick. You may need a needle to sew up your,
Right.
cut arm with, right? And you're gonna really wish you had it. So rather than just throw things out, just there's nothing wrong with laying it down going, "I don't know what to do with that right now, but it kinda, like, came with the kit, so I better, like, hold on to it," right?
Yep.
Or like, the
Don't
IKEA
reject it.
furniture.
Don't throw it away. You don't have to use it right now.
Right, right. Like the piece of IKEA furniture that you have to put together, and you're like, why do I need that many washers? Do not understand. Just leave it in the bowl,
Mhm.
keep building the piece of furniture, you'll find out,
You'll
right?
find
You'll
out
go
sooner or
through the
later.
steps and you'll need it. But if you just
Mhm.
throw it out and then you build it without it, it's gonna stink when that desk comes toppling down with the
Mhm.
expensive computers on it. And it's the same
Yeah.
thing with the gospel. Just because you don't understand it right now doesn't mean you won't understand it later. And just because you don't want it right now doesn't mean you won't want
Mhm.
it later.
Well, and in many cases, the reason why it doesn't fit too is because we are hiding from the truth. We have
Yes.
a lie, maybe lie is a strong word. We have a belief or a tradition that we think is important. We think it's probably true. It's part of the way we view the world, and it doesn't fit with this other piece. These things don't play nice together. It's oil and water. What do I do? I don't want to give up the tradition that I think is a true tradition, a good tradition, the right thing. And you're telling me there's this other thing that don't fit. Um, the danger there, of course, is that we can't just give up all of our traditions at once. It's
Right.
line upon line, pierce upon pierce. We have to learn these things. I think about like the polygamy deniers that have been driving me crazy because they're trying to change history. But why are they trying to change history? Because partly it's sometimes because they're trying to defend something that they believe is true. They'll be like, I love my wife and I hate the idea of betrayal. I hate the idea of lies. I hate the idea of hurting those I love. And I think that polygamy would do all those things. Therefore, I reject polygamy because I love my wife. Well, the dangerous thing here is that so much of our life is like that, where God's like, whoa, 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 I'm not telling you to reject love in order to accept plural marriage.
Right.
I want you to love and have mercy, and all of those are good, true principles. But these good, true principles apparently seem to contradict something else that someone's telling me is a true principle. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait until it comes into its proper place. Well, in many cases, that comes into our lives as polygamists only when the right person at the right time is sent by God by revelation. And then we know,
Uh,
oh, rejecting plural marriage in that instance, like when you took a plural wife, you have this place where you come to where it's like, this isn't about rejecting my other wife. This is about now it's her turn. Am I going to throw her out in the cold? Am I going to reject her? Am I going to say you're unworthy? You don't count. Your needs don't matter anymore because I already had enough. And then you start realizing, wait a second, the principle of love is the principle of plural marriage. You just people, and so people will say, well, I'm going to reject plural marriage because I think it conflicts with love. Oh boy, they just don't understand. Why? Because it's not the right time yet. It's not the right place yet. How would they feel if they were approaching God and God was like, sorry, heaven's full, no vacancy, get out of here.
Yep.
Right? That would be terrible. It's the same thing in our families. It's the same thing in all these principles. It has to be the right time. It has to be the right place. It has to fit in the right place. This is why I don't recommend people rush into plural marriage. Too often people think, I'm excited about this new thing I read about. You're excited about this new thing I read about. Let's all just go do it. And you don't realize might not be what God wanted. And
Right.
then it all goes to hell pretty fast.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You know?
Yes. Absolutely. And that's what I've told people that have started to flirt with fundamentalism a lot. Is like, look, you're gonna hear some stuff, and then you're gonna see some stuff.
Mhm.
But just know your walk is your own.
Yeah.
And anybody who doesn't have your back during your walk, right? Your
Mhm.
friends who can honestly see you're working through things, right?
Mhm.
If they don't have your back, that's a pretty good indication that they don't really care for you that much, right?
Right.
Um, and so take it slow, right? Learn things, listen,
Mhm.
watch, and the Lord will let you know when you're ready. You don't have to worry about anything else. Work with it,
Then
struggle
again,
with it.
maybe you're never as ready as you think you are. He's now passed away, so
No,
I can say his name, but there's a guy named Bill
no.
Olson who yeah, who was like, I read all the stuff. I read all the journal discourses. I read all these uncanonized revelations. I was like, I am so ready for this. And when he was first entering plural marriage and taking his first plural wife, right? He was already married, but he was taking a plural wife. He was like, I know what I'm doing. I'm so grateful that I know what I'm doing. And he's like, I knew nothing. I knew
Nope,
nothing.
nope, nope. That is so true. Look, look,
You
whether
can
you're
only learn
getting
this by doing this.
yes, look, whether you're getting married for your first time or your fifth time, I promise you,
It'll be
you're not
different.
really ready, right? Because it's always
Mhm.
going to be a little bit different because the people involved are a little bit different. And you're going to have to figure it out. And that's a good thing.
It's
That is
part of why
something
it's a
else.
true principle.
Yeah. And that's something I've told people. It's like sometimes you just got to learn how to embrace the suck and enjoy the journey,
Mhm.
even when it's tough,
Yep,
right? Because that's where the growth is happening. Enjoy the process of getting there as well.
yep.
Um,
And so, yeah, the
don't rush it.
dangerous thing, the dangerous thing is if you read the Book of Mormon and you think this is of God, and you read the Doctrine and Covenants, you think this is of God, and you believe that Joseph Smith was called of God. The danger is that too often we think I can have a little bit of this and not that. I can make Joseph Smith parrot what I wanted him to say. I can keep my traditions. Not exactly. Hard truths are coming for everybody. In fact, really, a spiritual life is a life of sacrifice, and you'll find this in all
Mhm.
faith. A truly spirit-filled life is gonna be a life of sacrifice. Even and I would say that that's even true, and I still think it's even God working in it for many other faiths. A man in the Catholic Church who becomes a celibate priest, who's dedicated his life to God, is going to receive from God an outpouring of the Spirit so that he can lead people right, to do good, and in measure with the sacrifice he's making. And he's making a huge sacrifice. And whenever we receive any blessing from God is by obedience to the law upon which is predicated. Every time he fulfills one of those laws, he's going to receive the blessing, right? And how do you do that? Sacrifice. It's
Yeah.
through sacrifice. And so there's a big danger in taking the all or nothing approach, that I have to sacrifice all things, which means I have to sacrifice all things right now. It's too
Yeah.
overwhelming, can't do it, so I'm going to sacrifice nothing and go pursue the things of the world. Not a good plan. It's not
No.
going to. It is line upon line.
No.
And so to have more revelation revealed to us, we have to have built the good foundation first. So I think I like your advice. It's like the multi-tool. It's like the Swiss Army knife. Yes, the fullness of the restored gospel, as found in the scriptures, especially an expanded set, right? You can't pick and choose. It's all in there. You got to accept that the whole kit is here and bring the whole kit with you. That doesn't mean you need to use every tool when you thought. wait for the Lord to reveal when to use each tool, when to build each part of the house, and then eventually it'll come together. And then you'll
Absolutely.
be grateful that you didn't throw away half the tool set. And this is why it's sad that these hidden revelations were hidden and lied about, because then when people do want those tools, when they needed those tools, they find themselves bereft of the tool that they needed, and it causes great suffering. Like it did for that one woman you mentioned, right? Who they were at odds, that they were terribly at odds with their own family, tearing them apart because he said, "This is a true revelation from God." And they said, "No, my church told me that's fake. It's a lie. It never existed. You guys made this up. It's a complete lie. It's a fabrication." And then they couldn't just have a difference of opinion. They had a difference of facts. And that is so much more dangerous.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. And look, for the first time in a very, very long time, not just because of the restored version that Drew has put together. You can find these in a bunch of different places. I
Oh
can't
yeah.
encourage you enough to go get those scriptures.
Well, in fact, that's kind of the interesting thing to note, right? This whole printing project was just a way to try to get it into a usable form, a more useful format,
Right.
an easier to carry format. Nothing in here is like new in that sense. All of this is stuff you can find if you were searching for it.
Right, absolutely. But never before have we had greater access to all those things, right?
Yeah, it's just
And
so
it
convenient now.
would yeah, it's just more convenient now. So I can't recommend the restored version highly enough for folks who wanna get back to kind of the OG way of doing things in the Mormon hood. But, you're gonna want to have, in one form or another, access to those revelations. And look, if you read it and it feels, um, repulsive to you, that's okay. That's look,
Mhm.
these are new things to you, and
Yep.
it's gonna happen. My my advice would be sit with it, set it aside,
Hmm.
but don't scrap it
Like,
because you're gonna
accept that
want
it's
that
part of
later.
the kit and that it's not a part of the kit you want to use right now, and you don't
Right.
understand how to use it. Give it time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then when you need it the most, it will be at your availability. And having it available to you will make all the difference in the world.
I suppose the thing is I wanted to do this overview because I really wanted to talk about what is it about Revelation that is hidden from us. It isn't
Yeah,
just outside being hidden from us; it's our own hearts not wanting to
right.
see the place where we have to sacrifice. In fact, I'd say that probably the most important revelation in each of our lives is the one we don't want to see right now. If we're going to
Right.
progress, it's that one that's like, oh, but I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to take that leap. That's the pinch point. It is probably the key to your progress. Unfortunately, that's a difficult
Absolutely.
truth. Um, but we kind of did an overview. I talk about the context, not really the revelations. I would hope that in your series you do probably shorter than this, but you do an episode on each revelation, including each of these as their own episode, because
Yeah.
each revelation is filled with insight, right? I mean, partly it's like let's just go in there, sequential scripture teaching, identify the principles. There's something that I presented for the Restoration Torah conference a few years ago, which was what is exegesis? In other words, how do we understand the scripture and pull truths out of it? So, you know, I give some tools for a Mormon version of exegesis. There's a Protestant way of doing exegesis. There's a Catholic way of doing exegesis. There's a Jewish way of doing exegesis. I was like, we need our own Mormon method. So I made a Mormon method of 8 steps of exegesis. Um, We should do that for all these because they're new revelations to us in many cases. Yes, I've read most of these that are in the restored version. I've read most of them already. But going through them and really digging in deep is something that we all need to do because now it's accessible. We are left with that excuse. We should learn. We should learn these principles, right? So I hope you'll do that. And I just want to make those points. I guess the last thing I'd like to end with then is let's end with the end of the last of the 4 hidden
And
revelations. All right. So what I'd really like to end on is the end of the 4th the fourth hidden revelation. It is the revelation to Wilford Woodruff in 1889, right? Listed as Wilford Woodruff 5 in the restored version triple. Because I think that this really is the kind of comfort that I get from these revelations. And it really tells me a lot in that context. The Lord says, I cannot deny my word, neither in blessings nor judgments. I, the Lord, will deliver my saints from the dominion of the wicked in my own due time and way. Therefore, let mine anointed gird up their loins, watch and be sober, and keep my commandments. Pray always and faint not. Exercise faith in the Lord and in the promises of God. Be valiant in the testimony of Jesus Christ. And the eyes of the Lord and the heavenly hosts are watching over you and your acts. Therefore, be faithful until I come. And I come quickly to reward every man according to the deeds done in the body. Even so, amen.
Mm.
The Lord's with us. That's the
Yeah.
reminder that I get from these revelations. When I first found out about them, I was filled with joy. So excited to know that the heavens were not sealed, that there was more revelation, there was more scripture, there was more light, more truth, more knowledge. And I've gained a testimony that there's always more light, there's always more truth, there's always more knowledge. It will not cease, not for the eternities to come. Millions upon millions of years, and a new revelation will be revealed to you and will no longer be hidden to you. And those mysteries will no longer be hidden, but instead your knowledge will expand, right? That's eternal progression. That's what is promised to the faithful, which means there's always going to be more.
Yeah.
And I think that it's hidden because people don't want it. When I first published 8 of these sections in the Addendum to the Doctrine and Covenants, I had people, lots of mainstream LDS people, that I'd say, "Did you know there's more scripture? There's more revelations. Isn't that awesome?" And I was surprised that the most common reaction was, "Oh, more? Do I have to read more? I already don't read the ones we have. I don't want more." And I realized that type of reaction being the most common reaction I got, even when I was in the mainstream LDS church and I was starting to read about these things, it shocked me because I thought, why wouldn't you want more light, more truth, more knowledge, more blessings? And that's why so many things remain hidden to us, right? So often we're like, look, I'm worn out. I have enough.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for more. And if so, I think that that's okay so long as your break is you taking a deep breath so that you can plunge in deeper, not so
Yeah.
that you can get comfortable in in your worldview without knowing the fullness of the truth.
No, I agree. And look, again, I think your religion should always challenge you.
Right? If it's not challenging you, what's it good for?
Right. What's it good for? If it doesn't challenge you, if it doesn't make you a little bit uncomfortable from time to time,
Sometimes a lot.
you're not doing it right. I hate to break it to you that way, right?
Mhm.
It would be, and again, I apologize, kind of a meathead, but it's like going to the gym and you've been lifting the same 5-pound weight that you have been since you were in high school. Where's the benefit? You can say you went to the gym. I guess that's good, right? You kept moving. That's good. But
Mhm.
if you're going to be there, you might as well get the maximum effect.
Get progress made. Make progress. Do something,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. And if it overloads you for a while, great. You hit your limit. Now you get to take a breath and you get to go back and do it again. And that's a good thing. And and because Mormons are goal driven, we're goal oriented. We really are, right? We're shooting for a thing, and that is good. We should be that way. But sometimes I don't think we give the journey enough credit,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes I think we become so fixated on the goal that we miss the lessons that we're supposed to take from getting there. And we have to be and oftentimes those are uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, those are great times. If we look back, at least myself, if I look back at the times I was most challenged, man, those were the times that had the most growth. And sometimes I look back on that and go, well, it kind of sucked in the moment, but man, I wish I could go back. I wish I could do
Mhm.
it again. Right? So
Mhm.
embrace it. Don't just shun it because it makes you feel uncomfortable. It's
Yeah.
okay to be uncomfortable.
And that's why I read that part, don't be afraid, right? The Lord is with us. He may not be able to deny his word, but he will deliver us. And if we have faith in the Lord, in the promises of God, it makes life easier, not harder. I know that it feels like it's making it harder when we have to make a sacrifice, but in the end, it's worth it. It's worth it to
100%.
not throw things out. You don't know what's baby and what's bathwater at first. You don't know which tools you're going to need. So don't start throwing tools away out of your toolbox. You might never
Absolutely.
know when you're going to need it. So just, yeah, let's have faith instead of fear
Yeah,
about new revelations. They are hard though.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ben, that was good stuff, my man.
Yeah, it's great to chat. I hope that people stuck with us all the way through that. It was rather long.
It's all right. We're only a couple hours in.
Yeah, I
I've
was gonna say
done
a
way
couple hours,
longer.
pretty long episode. I know. I've listened to some of your episodes that are even longer, but uh, you
Yes,
know,
yes, yes,
most of us have a very
yes.
short attention span these days. So
They do. They do. Yes, yes. People said that early on, right? That with 2, 3, 4 hours worth of conversation, you'll lose people. But funny thing is I actually found people that were hungry for that, right?
yep.
And look, good luck on tearing anything apart in Mormonism in 45 minutes. It just doesn't exist.
Right? They call this deep doctrine for a reason. If we're really going to go through all of these new sections, all these revelations that we haven't had before, and we're going to perform proper exegesis on them, there is a wealth of information there. In fact, so much information in these revelations that we may never fully exhaust it. The same way that in the Bible, there is so much information we have not come close to fully exhausting the amount of knowledge, light, and truth we can get from fully understanding. It's the same thing with
Absolutely.
these revelations. All the revelations of God are deep in symbolism, in meaning, in principles, even very esoteric things are hidden within them. And so, yeah, the deeper you dig, the more jewels you will find. The more you'll find that pearl of great price for which a man gave all that he had, that he might obtain it, right? And so
Right.
that's what I believe about the scriptures, and these are scriptures. These revelations are from God. And
100%.
as such, it is worth selling all that you possess that you might obtain that pearl of great price. Is that hard? Yes, it is hard. But like the rich young ruler that Jesus spoke to, Jesus offered him a greater treasure than all that he possessed. But when he couldn't see it, he went away sorrowing because he thought, why would I sacrifice all of this? I have so much good. Why would I sacrifice all of it? I can't sacrifice all of this. But how much better off would he have been if he had? His
Right.
substance has perished. The rich young ruler is long since dead. And he is remembered only as someone who had a chance and missed out on becoming one of the apostles of the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
the sacrifice is worth it. It's just hard to see that. At first,
Yeah.
it's just so hard to see that. It's like, no, I'm not giving up all this good stuff.
Don't look at the totality of the work. Just start.
Yeah.
Just start. Right? Don't think about the dauntingness, the
You
how
get overwhelmed
daunting it is.
like he did.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do that. Just start taking bites at it and it'll all come to be. But Ben, this was excellent stuff. I'm glad we did it, and we'll have you back on to perform some of that eisegesis on some of these sections here. Because,
Sounds
like I
good.
said, I plan on going through every single one of them, and it's going to be a years long process. But
Yep.
we are absolutely going to go through all of them because I feel like there's wisdom in that. These are new things to most people. And
Mhm.
as new things, they deserve to be treated with the same kind of love and respect we have treated the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants with for the
Mhm.
last, I don't know, 200 years. It's
Yep.
time. We're there. And this is a tremendous blessing that we have now. And I think it's time that we give them their proper due. So I'm going to make an effort in that for sure. And so there's going to be lots of people I call on to go over these to get different perspectives, and I am super excited for this prospect because it is sorely needed, and let's get Mormonism in its fullness into our systems and start learning more and understanding more. But
Mhm.
bro, love you. I appreciate you being here. I can't wait to do this again.
All right. Well, let me know.
All right. Bye
Bye, everybody.
everybody.